So, hello everybody. Welcome to part two of the everything you need to know about coaching creatives with the IAPC&M and Eric Maisel. I'm Dawn Campbell, your host. Because it's part two, we're just going to dive straight into it because I know Eric's a very popular guy and we've got hundreds of people on this call. So it's a 90-minute session and the last 30 minutes is going to be a Q&A. So please post your questions and I will field them to Eric. So over to you, Eric, and everybody, please enjoy.
Thank you, Dawn. It continues to be weird just talking into the computer, but I guess weird is the order of the day. So welcome, everyone. To those of you who are here for the first part, welcome back. And to those of you coming fresh this time, welcome to the second half. I'm going to review the first half super quickly for those of you who are new to the webinar, and also just because overlearning these things is a good thing. So during this webinar, we're going to do items 7 through 12 on this list, but in the first webinar, we did items 1 through 6. Let me just quickly go over them. So these are these, so to speak, major challenges facing creatives. Of course, there are other ones, but just for organizational sake, we're covering these 12. First challenge we discussed was that the work is hard to write your symphony or write your book or do new work as a visual artist or et cetera, et cetera. This sort of goes without saying, and yet many creatives somehow think that it should be easier or that someone else is having it easier or that it will get easier or something about easier. So headline 1, just embrace the hardness of the work. It's going to be hard till the end of time. You do this novel and you do it well, congratulations, now you're on to the next hard thing. So you can enjoy that moment of celebration for 30 seconds and then get on to the next hard thing. Number 2, the existential question, why to bother at all with taking another photograph or crafting another thing or writing another thing, why to bother? We spoke at length about the why to bother, which has to do with big ideas around life purpose versus life purposes, donning the mantle of meaning maker, deciding to matter, some big ideas. But let me just say the headline simply, and that is, we decide to bother because while we're here, there are many things that are important to us, one of which is creating. Other things are important also, but one of the things that's important to us is creating. And that's why we bother. We bother because we're alive, we're here, and we have certain self-obligations and self-responsibilities. Number 3, Freud said all blockage was self-censorship, meaning he thought that people were really worried about putting themselves out there. Artists were really worried about putting themselves out there and getting pushback or criticism, negative feedback, judgment, all of that. A lot of artists and all would-be artists are worried about this. Folks who are not getting their work done are probably not getting their work done because they're, at least in part, worried about the work being judged and criticized. We'll come back around to this later in the webinar, but that was a headline from the first webinar. Number 4, folks don't understand the reality of process well enough, or maybe they understand it but wish it were different. And the reality of process is that, you might spend 2 years writing a book, that's no good. And I'm going to pause for effect there because we don't want to hear that, we don't want to know that. But that's the reality of process, is that not everything we do is going to work. Again, we wish that were different. We wish process were different. We wish reality was different, but it isn't. So you want to embrace that really deeply, that you're out for a body of work, and some of the things you try will work. Some of the things you try won't work. You have to be easier with that than you may currently be. Number 5, we talked about how to deal with procrastination, which is an anxiety state, and resistance and blockage, which are also anxiety states. And so since I'm calling them anxiety states, you deal with them sort of obviously by having anxiety management tools at your disposal. What to say about that in a word or two? There's a difference between blockage in my mind, which is a deeper thing, a more difficult thing, than everyday resistance. We're all everyday resistant to doing the work because it's way easier to play a video game than to write a novel. It's just easier to turn to the easy thing. And that's where everyday resistance comes from, that it's easier to do something else. We just have to recognize that and have our tactics for cracking through everyday resistance. Some folks on the line will know that one of the techniques I teach with respect to cracking through resistance is cracking an egg as a kind of emblematic way of breaking through on a given day. Most people don't want to crack an egg because they don't want to waste an egg, but were you to not care about wasting an egg, that's one kind of ceremonial way to crack through resistance each day, is to crack an egg and then get to work. And then number 6, and this is where we left off last time, so we'll return to it. Excuse the sirens outside. Some ambulances are going by if you can hear them. Completely usual thing that happens is that ambulances have to go by and fire engines have to go by when you're doing a webinar. So let me go to number 6, because this is where we left off, and that's weathering the creative personality. So I'm going to zip through some slides. And come to, this is where we left off, somewhere midway in this challenge. As I mentioned last time, in the creativity literature, there are maybe 75 traits of the creative person identified. Lots of different ideas of what make for a creative person. We're not going to cover all of them. We couldn't possibly. It's all interesting, but we don't have time. So let me focus on some of the ones that I think are the biggest issues with respect to the creative personality. A, I think that we're actually talking about only 1% or a percentage of 1% of the whole population when we talk about people who are, let's say, easy with creativity. And again, I'm pausing for effect because while it's fine to say that everyone is creative, it's fine to say that, and in some sense everyone is creative, I think we're talking about someone who pops out of the womb already stubbornly creative, stubbornly individualistic, and with lots of appetite already, right from the beginning. Well, that's lovely. Appetite is lovely, except when it has to do with peanuts or heroin or sex or what have you. Then we have to monitor our appetites. It's wonderful to have an appetite for creating. That's wonderful. But we have to watch out for the shadow sides of appetite, which, to say it simply, are addictive tendencies. Can't say a lot about that here, but if you're interested in this, I have a whole book out on this called Creative Recovery, which is really the only, I think, recovery program for creative and performing artists specifically. And it takes this into account, that we have to deal with some extra appetite. Number 2, we have to deal with some extra energy, some extra life force, some extra chi. If we had lots of time, we could talk about ADHD just being lots of energy and how it's really unfortunate - immoral to label energetic kids as mentally disordered because they're bouncing off walls because life bores them. But that's a whole big other subject. Creatives have to deal with energy. They have to deal with incipient mania. That is, with their brain really starting to race too fast. In my language, we need to mediate our manias. That is, we need to know how to control them, how to shut them down. They aren't per se a danger, except when we go off the rails. Because to say this again simply, we want that energy. Let me put a parenthesis here. Another way to speak about this energy is in terms of what I call productive obsessions. And as you know, the mental health world usurped the word obsession in the 1880s, stole it, really, and defined all obsessions as unwanted intrusive thoughts. So that meant you couldn't have a positive obsession. By definition, all obsessions were negative. And we're still there today with all obsessions being negative, but creative people have known for thousands and millions and billions of years that there are productive obsessions, that you really bite into your work and want to stay there. That should not be considered a bad thing, productive obsession, unless you can't shut it off. So that's it's the dual task of having productive obsessions. Most people in our culture, especially because we're not a culture that likes to talk about things like obsessions, in our culture especially, we suppress that energy in all kinds of ways. You know, suppress it with another TV show or another sandwich or another this or another that. We suppress that energy. So we have to unleash that energy and then manage it. Number 3, since we pop out of the womb already stubbornly individualistic, looking around us, saying to ourselves, who are these people who call themselves our parents, and why are they so silly, and why do I already know more than them, and all of that? Since that's where we pop out of the womb, we're going to spend our whole life dealing with this issue of individuality, trying to maintain our individuality in the face of the world wanting to squash us and make us draw within the lines. And because we're going to spend our lifetime struggling with individuality, we're also going to spend our lifetime a little bit oppositional, have lots of oppositional energy with the rest of the world. That doesn't mean we're mean-spirited or difficult people or this or that. It means we're trying to retain our individuality in the face of the world not really wanting us to do that. So that is a big issue. The fourth, many creative people would rather be in their studio writing their book or painting their painting than dealing with other human beings. That's just the fact of the matter. So because relationships are important, because we do get lonely and cold and unhappy when we're not in relationship, because of all of that, we have to get relationships into the picture, onto our plate somehow. We need to figure out how to both create and relate. If we think we can get away with just creating, well, lots of tremendously successful artists have ended up committing suicide because their lives were too cold. They did lots of great paintings and composed lots of great symphonies, but they also killed themselves because that wasn't enough. So don't think you can get away with life being just about creating. It needs to be about multiple life purposes, one of which is relationships. The next one, because we popped out of the womb already having meaning issues, not everyone on the face of the earth has meaning issues. Not everyone is pestering themselves about what's meaningful, what isn't meaningful. Millions upon millions and maybe billions upon billions of people are not pestering themselves about that question. And we are. Is this painting meaningful? Is this short story meaningful? Et cetera, et cetera. And because we are always dealing with these meaning issues, and because meaning can drain out of the enterprise very easily, we are stuck with recurrent existential sadness. We may also be stuck with this because, and we'll probably get to this in another moment, but we may also be stuck with this sadness because it may be a feature of our original personality. We may be born either a little sadder than the next person or with certain qualities that together amount to this sadness direction in life. We'll hit upon this again in a moment or three. And then as a feature of the creative personality, we must deal with, in a way that lots of other people do not necessarily have to deal with this, we have to deal with lots of failures and disappointments and regrets. We've set ourselves up for this. We've set ourselves up with sending our manuscript out 5,000 times and getting it rejected 4,999 times. We're searching for and hunting for and waiting for and wanting that one acceptance. But as we are working towards that one acceptance, we must deal with all of these disappointments. So, some tactics. We talked in the first webinar about the idea of starting your day with a life purpose check-in, with the idea of having identified your many life purposes, actually writing them out so you have a list or a menu of life purposes, and deciding each day which of those life purposes you can get to on that day. And personality management ought to be one of your life purposes. It ought to be something that you're working on in a daily way. Doesn't mean that you have to spend hours on it each day, but you should be identifying something that's important to you that needs that kind of work and attention. It might be an energy thing. It might be doing a better job of getting a productive obsession going or shutting a productive obsession off. It might be something to do with talking yourself into relating better, etc. And let me connect 1, 2, and 3 up a little bit. By the way, now, of course, we have a leaf blower outside, so I'm speaking even louder than I need to. So I think the leaf blower will meet the ambulance soon, and I'll have to be screaming shortly. So number 2, personality upgrade. In my model of personality, personality is made up of 3 parts. Original personality, that is those qualities that we bring into the world initially. And anybody who's had kids or kittens or puppies know that every creature comes into the world already itself. We are somebody already at birth. Psychology, psychiatry, psychotherapy takes none of that into account, has no way of thinking about or talking about original personality. We know better. So there's original personality, then there's formed personality. That's who we become over time. Sort of that concrete us, that stodgy us, that too solid us, that immobile us, formed personality. Then the third part I call available personality. That's our remaining freedom, which we all have, our remaining freedom to become the person we want to become. And I think of that available personality as a kind of amount. That is, it varies depending on where we are in life circumstances. For instance, if you're actively addicted to heroin and you're spending your whole day running around looking for a fix, you don't have a lot of available personality available. You don't have a lot of freedom. But the instant that you enter recovery, you haven't regained all of your available personality, but lots more available personality is available to you by virtue of you entering into recovery. And I think that's a pretty good metaphor or analogy for this idea of available personality and how its amount changes over time. So to re-say number 2, what we're talking about in number 2 is it's the daily effort to make use of your available personality to retrieve from your formed personality more and more freedom, more and more availability. Because on the one hand, we are stuck. That's why things are so difficult. On the one hand, we are stuck, and on the other hand, we are free. And I think this model speaks to the reality of both of those things, the stuckness and the freedom. Number 3, we don't want to rush to the belief that we have some disorder or some problem or some challenge when what we may be facing as a creative person is some feature of our original personality, like perhaps a little bit of extra intelligence, a little bit of extra energy, a little bit of extra stubbornness, a little bit of extra sadness, this, that, and the other thing. If those things are part of our original personality, they are to be accepted, not fought with. Now they have to be dealt with also. Just to repeat myself, if you're born with lots of energy, that's going to be an issue your whole life long. You're not going to want to suppress it in ways that harm you, and you're not going to want to go with it in ways that harm you. It's going to be a lifelong challenge dealing with that energy. Number 4, and I wish we could talk about sadness versus depression for its own hour. It deserves its own hour, but let me just say a quick word or two here. When you begin to understand that there may be some core sadness that's inevitable in your being, maybe because you see the world clearly, some pundits say that depression is just good reality testing. And I'm pausing there just to let that sink in. Sadness, depression may be just good reality testing, seeing the world for what it is. So if that's the case, that sadness is not necessarily and isn't a mental disorder, then you want to be careful about buying that label for yourself, a clinical depression label for yourself, and heading in the direction of things called medication, antidepressants, which aren't, in my view, medication, but are merely chemicals with powerful effects. Now, in a given instance, you may want that effect. If you're on the edge of suicide and you really need to have a door opened to a second chance, maybe you need a chemical. But there are actually only rare instances, in my point of view, where you want to be taking these chemicals with powerful effects. There are other things to try. Let me just say with respect to this, if what I'm saying seems important to you, let me just recommend 2 or 3 or 4 of my books, because I can't say it here in a mouthful. The books I would recommend are Rethinking Depression, The Van Gogh Blues, The Future of Mental Health, and Humane Helping. And I know that's a mouthful, but that's all by way of saying there's a lot to think about with respect to the current mental disorder paradigm, a lot that you don't know, a lot that you ought to know, and a lot that if you knew it would actually help you a lot and help you avoid receiving one of these lifelong mental disorder labels. They're not diagnoses because it's not real medicine. It's just a labeling system. Okay. Number 5, you want to be on guard with respect to this task of maintaining individuality. It's easy to want to let go and go with the flow. Let me give you one kind of example where a creative person, we're going to get to this in a moment, so I'll be repeating it in a moment, but let me say it now. Let's say you have a deep desire to do a certain kind of painting, and that would be an expression of your individuality. But you've learned to do another kind of painting that is quite successful and that people want. You are going to feel stuck, not just mildly stuck, but deeply stuck, not knowing whether to produce the things that are wanted, that bore you to make, or to go in the direction of maintaining, expressing your current individuality. And I'm pausing for effect because this is not an easy situation. You will be really caught on the horns of a dilemma, because if you have customers waiting for your next stripe painting, or your next painting of a dog with his mouth open, or your next this, or your next that, and you really want to be doing Starry Night or something different, there's a lot of pressure on you to do that next dog painting. Pressure from you, pressure probably from your family, pressure from your curator if you have such a person in your life, or from your gallery owner if you have such a person in your life. Lots of pressure to repeat yourself. And repeating yourself is the opposite of maintaining your individuality. So let me put a period there because we're going to come to it again. And then last, it isn't just relating that you need to do, but you need to be telling yourself that it is of value, because to repeat what I said earlier, we find it easy to devalue the very idea of relating. We find that very easy to do. I don't really want a party. I don't want to go to a cocktail party. Oh, no. Please, shoot me first. No. So we have to be talking ourselves back into the remembrance that life is too cold and lonely. It just does not feel good if we don't have some way of valuing relationships, not just valuing them, actually having them. Maybe they'll all be by Zoom right now, and that may be less than ideal, but even a Zoom relationship may be better than no relationships at all. Well, I see that I'm spending a I'm not sure that we'll get to it. I am now speeding up. Okay, challenge 7, dealing with the marketplace. Who wants to do this? Oh, nobody I know. But we must all, right? Because, well, let me not say the because. Let me go through what this challenge amounts to. On the one hand, we fear the relationship. We don't want to get criticism. We don't want to be rejected one more time. We hate the experience of being criticized and rejected and disappointed. That's A. And B, we loathe the marketplace. Oh, 3-for-1 sale, or discounted only today, or hurry, grab this, it's the best thing since sliced bread, or blah, blah, blah. We are sick and tired of advertising and everything being hype, etc. Number 2, it makes us anxious to think about dealing with the marketplace, because dealing with the marketplace is a certain kind of performance, and we do experience performance anxiety before dealing with marketplace players and while dealing with marketplace players. All of you on the call know the following, and that is the world's #1 phobia is public speaking. #1 phobia before flying, spiders, crossing bridges, whatever you could name, snakes, it's public speaking. So that means that should alert you to how difficult we find it to put ourselves out there, even to the extent of speaking 2 minutes at work on some subject in front of our coworkers. Get a panic attack over that. So we want to remember that dealing with the marketplace really exacerbates our anxiety, which is why we need anxiety management strategies in place. And I think because I'm scared that I may get to miss the opportunity to speak about this later as time goes, I want to talk about anxiety management techniques right now so that I don't lose the opportunity later on. So all of you clear your minds for 1 second and let me explain where we are suddenly. Suddenly, we are talking about how to manage all the kinds of anxieties that arise for us as creative people. Why so much anxiety? Well, here's one reason, dealing with the marketplace. Another reason is that the reality of the creative process is that it is making one choice after another, and choosing provokes anxiety. Another reason there is so much anxiety is that creating is genuinely going into the unknown, and going into the unknown provokes anxiety, etc., etc. There are many reasons why we get anxious as creative people. So, what to do? Well, A, I recommend my book, Mastering Creative Anxiety, which has maybe 20 categories of things to try. And then another book of mine, Performance Anxiety. So if you can't hear what I'm saying now, you can always get those books and work on this. But let me go through maybe half a dozen anxiety management techniques. Number 1, just some deep breathing. 5 seconds on the inhale, 5 seconds on the exhale. In performance mode, I can't quite go to the place of demonstrating some deep breathing because I'm too revved up to do it at this moment, but you know what deep breathing would look like and would feel like. So just 2 or 3 deep breaths can help. Number 2, thinking thoughts that serve you. That is a cognitive solution. You don't want to be creating dramas internally all day long. That raises your anxiety. You don't want to be saying things, oh my God, it's 72 degrees and I can only paint if it's 71 degrees. Oh my God. Oh my God, I think my cat walked by. Where's she going? I better follow her. I haven't seen her. We don't want to create those dramas. We do because we are looking for ways out so as not to have to encounter the work. Let me just make this clear. The number one thing we do to avoid anxiety is to flee the encounter, is to get out of there. So if we are anxious, we are looking for ways to get out of there. We don't want our inner language to be supporting our flight. We want it to be doing the opposite. We want to be saying to ourselves, I'm really calm. I'm feeling really calm. So let's now marry 1 and 2, some deep breathing and some right thinking. And I call these marriages incantations. It's really just the simple idea of dropping a useful thought into a deep breath. And again, as usual, I have a whole book on this, and it's called 10 Zen Seconds. And the 10 of that title is 5 seconds on the inhale, 5 seconds on the exhale. But it's the idea of dropping a useful thought into a breath. And the thought might be something as simple as, I am perfectly calm. Or right here, right now. Right here on the inhale, right now on the exhale. Any set of words that work to calm you dropped into a breath. So 1 was breathing, 2 was thinking, 3 was marrying breathing and thinking. 4, the technique is called reorienting. That is turning away from the stimulus that is provoking the anxiety.
Eric,
If you're a performer,
sorry, Eric, can I just check? I don't think we're on the same slide. We're on.
I'm still on this. I'm still on challenge 7. I'm talking about the anxiety and performance anxiety.
Okay. The tactic.
I know that I'm going. Okay, okay, I see what you're saying. It's on the next slide too. Okay, let me rush through this then, and then I'll come to the next slide and continue. Thank you, Dawn. Well, I think we see what this is. These are some of the challenges of the marketplace, the things that we do not want to be doing. We don't seek out opportunities enough or seize the opportunities that come our way. Everyone has difficulty pricing their work and negotiating. We all harbor this hope that someone else will do the marketing, but of course, typically we must. And number 6 is really a true one, and that is that the tasks involved in selling are multitudinous. Lots and lots of moving parts, long to-do lists on a daily basis. And if we're not making those long to-do lists, we're probably not really taking care of business. So let me get to the tactics and where we were. First tactic with respect to this challenge is to not think of yourself as a salesperson, but that you are befriending your work. Try to really engage with this reframe and let it be less about the marketplace and more about, I want to be on the side of the things I'm creating. And if I'm not, who will be? Let me be a good friend to my work. Number 3, number 2, and that's where we now were, naming anxiety management strategies. And where I was talking about reorienting. And let me just say that quickly. That's the strategy where if, for instance, you're a performer and you're in the wings, what often makes performers anxious is hearing the audience arrive. So rather than listening to the audience arrive, you would turn away and maybe look at ads on the bulletin board in the green room. You would turn away from the stimulus. That's one kind of anxiety management strategy. Another is what's called disidentifying, and this is a big one. This comes from the school of psychotherapy called psychosynthesis. And it's the idea that I am not my X, whatever X is, I am not my novel. That it's like detachment in Buddhism. It's maybe my novel hasn't worked, Maybe it's not okay, but I am still perfectly fine. By reminding ourselves that you are still perfectly fine, even though a given thing may not be working, you reduce your experience of anxiety. And then just my last one, as I say, there are many, many strategies we could talk about, but the last one is a certain kind of visualization that I think is a powerful anxiety management tool. And that's to visualize a switch somewhere inside of you that when you flip it, you just become a calmer person. It's really, the visualization is really you having a conversation with yourself saying, I would like to be a calmer person. Less histrionics, less dramas, less making mountains out of molehills. And if you can find this switch to flip, that and that alone may prove to be your go-to anxiety management strategy. Number 3, a basic tactic for dealing with this is to just have a daily practice of doing your sales. I think, Dawn, someone's on the line who's unmuted, so there's quite a bit of banging.
Everyone can just check they're all on mute, please. I'm guessing it's somebody who's just joined the call. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't think the banging was in my head. I thought it was in reality.
Yeah, I think you were right.
Good. Okay. I suggest to clients, now we're on with respect to number 3 here, that they do 3 things in the service of their creative business every single day. That they have it be a daily practice. There is power in making things a daily practice. And the main power is that when you don't have a thing as a daily practice, well, you might think, well, I'm just skipping a day or two, but what happens is that months and years vanish. When we let a thing slide for 3 days or a week, suddenly months vanish. That's why it's so, if something is worth doing, if it's one of our life purposes, if it's worth doing, it should be done as a daily practice. And daily means daily. By the way, for me, daily means 7 days a week because I don't think our life purpose needs or our meaning needs end on the weekend somehow. I think that's an odd notion that our meaning needs might end on the weekend. So by daily practice, I really do mean every day. If this subject of daily practice and how to build a better daily practice interests you, of course, I have a book on this coming out called The Power of Daily Practice, comes out in September. It's really interesting because it describes what I think are the main elements, 20 elements of practice that make for a strong daily practice. Number 4, we have limited time and limited resources. So one tactic with respect to dealing with marketplace anxiety is to pick things that have the possibility of providing a bigger rather than a smaller impact. Meaning something as simple as gathering 20 people online for the workshop you want to run, rather than gathering 3 people in your living room for the workshop you want to run. We sometimes go for the smaller thing because we think it will be easier, but actually what's happening is we think it will be safer somehow. That there's less possibility of criticism or pushback or this, that, or the other thing if we keep it small. But that's really not true. You may get more pushback from 3 people in your living room than 20 people online. In fact, it's rather likely that the intensity of dealing with just 3 people in your living room may be harder than dealing with 20 people online. So the headline there is, as you strategize what business things you want to do, keep this mantra in mind, bigger rather than smaller, and as a parallel mantra, sooner rather than later. If something comes up for you as a thing to try, try it. Try not to put it off. Try to do it now. Number 5, one of the things that helps with anxiety is to upgrade our organizational skills. And that sounds like goes in one ear and out the other. Of course, I should do that. But think for a second how hard it is. If you're a writer, to be keeping 3,700 bits of your novel here and there, an idea here, a thought there, 5 words over there. It really is difficult to be organized as a creative person because we're dealing with things as ephemeral as thoughts and ideas, fleeting emotions, fleeting images. How to deal with all of that organizationally? Well, there are lots of things to be said about that, but let me just name one thing that I think is a useful skill. This will be just with respect to writers, but I think you can translate this to whatever is your medium. Let's say you're working on a novel and you have bits and pieces all on computer files, in computer folders. It's very hard to keep any of that organized or to know what you have. It's very hard to deal with that. Many writers give up because they have all of these bits and they don't know what they have. My simple suggestion is to print things out, put them on the floor and walk around them. Very old-fashioned, but still wise, because then you can physically move the 3 bits that go together into one pile and the 5 bits that go together into another pile and actually make piles, which then become actual chapters, etc. So that's just one example of a tactic or strategy with respect to upgrading your organizational skills. We should be creating these we shouldn't hope that there are electronic ways of doing these things that will actually suffice. We have to dream up rather retrograde, old-fashioned things often that work to keep us organized. And then last but not least, on this slide, when you are dealing with the marketplace, what I see people doing all the time is when they manage to deal with the marketplace, when they can manage their anxiety well enough that they try something, they then very typically write an email that's about 5,000 words too long. They sort of want to get everything about their product or creation or what have you into that email for fear of forgetting something or to prove that it's a good product or something. So this ABC communication rule is keep your communications with the marketplace affirmative, brief, and clear. People on the other end will love you if you send 4-sentence emails and not 17-paragraph emails. You know how it feels when you get a 17-paragraph email. Probably you don't deal with it, or you don't deal with it for 3 weeks. So this sounds simple and awfully just tactical, but it's actually very important because since sales is about numbers, you need people, if you're sending, let me give a simple example. If you're sending a query email about your novel out to 20 literary agents, A, you want them to open that email, which means you want your subject line to be smart. And B, you want them to read the email, which means it must be concise. You must get to your 3 or 4 points quickly. Okay, let me put a period there. We could spend a lot of time about how to communicate in the marketplace because you can tell that it would be sad to create a wonderful thing, but then not sell it very well, not deal with the marketplace very well. We want to get good at both of those things, the creating part and the marketing part. And I'm going to really super go faster. I swear, I promise. Okay, challenge 8. To return to a big headline, our creating is important to us, but it ought not to be the only thing important to us. There is a switch to be made for all of us from the purpose of life to identifying our life purpose choices, choices as in plural, and then figuring out how to get as many of them as possible onto our daily to-do list. I think the creating can come first each day, unless there's a reason why one of your other life purposes ought to come first. The creating probably ought to come first or can come first, but you do want to be thinking about your day as a certain kind of negotiation where you are getting to as many life purposes as possible. Relational challenges, we could spend the next X hours on that. By the way, I do want to say one thing about relational challenges, just as a parenthesis. Folks, you guys, most people don't understand the extent to which many of you have been wounded by an authoritarian in your life. Authoritarian parent, authoritarian sibling, authoritarian mate, etc. Pundits who write in this area, I write in this area, we have no real statistics, but those who claim to have some statistics feel that as many as 25% of our species is authoritarian by nature. And I don't need to define it for you. You know what authoritarian is, sort of intuitively. But let's just say it one way, a bully. So if you grew up with a bullying parent, that has lifelong consequences. It may make it hard for you to express your individuality because that was bullied out of you, etc. So again, of course, I can't say enough about this subject briefly, but I do have a book on this out about authoritarian wounding. And if this subject interests you, then I would take a look at that book. Its title escapes me this second. It's something like Surviving the Authoritarian Wound, or but if you look up my name and authoritarianism, you'll find it. Let me just say one more word about this. In the 1950s, a lot of writing began on what was called the authoritarian personality. The person associated with the subject is a fellow named Adorno, who was at UC Berkeley. But all of that writing was political and sociological in nature and not about the psychology of authoritarians in the family. And I've been writing in that area for some years now about authoritarian wounding in the family. I recommend that you think about this because an awful lot of what one's current challenges may be about still dealing with what I call the authoritarian wound. Okay, challenges of circumstances, that's another huge subject. We know about circumstances, pandemics, and this, that, and the other thing, and how that affects us. Number 5, the indignity of day jobs. You know, we really do suffer when we have to do something for 50 hours a week that isn't the thing we want to be doing. We know how hard that is. I'm saying this very quickly, too quickly, because this is a super sore point for many people. And I just want to pause a little bit. I don't want to rush through all of these things. I feel a little rushy energy, but if you are suffering with this 50-hour day job, then you do want to think through as best you can if there is any way to make that transition to your creative career being a real career. And that takes lots of strategizing, lots of cobbling. You may have to do 9 things like also give classes or also do this or also do that, but they would be worth doing if you could finally not have to do that 50-hour job that you don't want to be doing. It's such a super thief of our life, that 50-hour day job. So too big a subject to capture in a split second, but my headline thought there is, we often know that we are going to make a change, but it takes us far too long to actually make that change. I've actually done primary research on this, and my findings are that for significant things like changing our belief system or changing our career, it takes about 5 years from the clear knowing that we're going to make the change to making the change. That's a long time. That's a long time to wait for the divorce or the career change or the this or the that. Again, I'm pausing. So we're going to come to a slide in a minute which says something about tolerating difficult thoughts and how that's an important tactic. But let me say it here. If you know that there is a change coming, but you just find it hard to think about it, you know that you have to give up your current career, or you know that you must leave your mate because it's a dangerous situation, or you know this, or you know that. See if you can tolerate that thought for 10 full seconds. Because often it's just a fleeting thought and then we defensively reject it and go back to work or stay in the relationship. It's a very powerful self-coaching tool to be able to tolerate a difficult thought for a while. If you can tolerate those difficult thoughts, that allows you to move more quickly to the next step of beginning to envision what actual change you need to make. And last on this slide, the challenges presented by culture, society, the world, pushback from the world. I write in controversial areas. Let me just give you I'll give you two examples. No, one example, because I don't have time. One example of dealing with being a creative person and dealing with the world. Because you don't intend to do your work and then hide it away in a drawer, do you? No, I hope you don't. I hope you understand that you mean to do your work and then put it out there, and then things will happen. You'll get 1-star reviews on Amazon. You'll get this, you'll get that, things will happen. Here's one thing that happened to me. I was disputing the legitimacy of certain aspects of psychotherapy and psychology in general. I was disputing this on my Psychology Today blog, which is called Rethinking Mental Health, which has millions of views, which means I have a bit of an audience, which means I annoyed important people. And so the American Psychological Association threatened me with legal and civil action for using a phrase I was using in those days called natural psychology. They said I had to cease and desist using the phrase natural psychology because they owned the word psychology. You can't think of anything more preposterous except maybe what's going on in the world right this split second, but it's hard to think of anything more preposterous than some organization saying we own the word psychology. But these are the kinds of pushback that happens when you are out in the world. Whistleblowers don't fare well. Again, I've got to pause here because I don't want the next thing in your mind to be, therefore I better not blow a whistle. That's not the next thing. It's that whistleblowers are vital. You speaking, you standing up is vital. We can't have civilization without us standing up. Do we want the pushback? Heavens no. Do we want to feel unsafe? Heavens no. Must we stand up? I hope you agree that we must. I want to shoot through slides for a second just to see what I really want to focus on for the next little bit. So give me a moment, everyone, just to see what I want to do. Okay, we've done that, done. Let me just say a little bit about limited opportunities, just a little bit. Let's say you're a performer and you can only manage to acquire 7 gigs a year. That may already be amazing that you can do that. That may already be wonderful and difficult. But that means that you just have 7 gigs a year. What do you do for the other, what's 365 minus 7, 358 days? Do you just practice your instrument? Well, that's a little intolerable. Just practice. So this idea of limited opportunities is an important one. You have to figure out how to increase your opportunities. That's our everyday work, increase our opportunities, and what to do when you don't have that gig. What are you to do? Well, I want to shoot through. Create the opportunities, cheerlead each day. By the way, I hope that folks will have a way of getting hands on these slides because you can see I'm now zipping. So I hope you'll be able to get these slides one way or another.
Yeah,
okay.
We'll put them on the blog for you, Eric.
Excellent. This one I have to stay with because this is one of our bigger challenges and we better deal with it. It's the Buddhist phrase, get a grip on your mind. We all better get a better grip on our mind than we usually do. So, what are these challenges? Well, negative thoughts. I'm not talented. I don't have a chance. More insidious self-sabotaging thoughts. Wow, it's hot today. That doesn't sound like a self-sabotaging thought, but it is, because at the end of that sentence is a little hidden, and I don't really feel like working. Boy, it's hot today, and I feel a little drained. We are very tricky creatures, and so we don't necessarily say things to ourselves straightforwardly like, I have no talent. What we may be saying are things like, I'm very busy, or I'm very tired. And those sound like true thoughts because they are 65% true thoughts. There are so many grains of truth in them that we allow them to just stay there. We can't. We have to append a big but, big B-U-T, at the end of such thoughts as soon as we hear them. Boy, I'm busy, but I have 20 minutes for my novel. Wow, I'm tired, but I have energy to work on my song for a little bit. If you don't append that but, no one else will. You're going to lose that day and that week and that month and that year to I'm very tired and I'm very busy. Number 3, you don't want to countenance true thoughts just because they're true. That's not the criterion for countenancing a thought. What do I mean? I think I may mention this on the first webinar. If it is, sorry for repeating myself, but let's say you're a writer, you go into a bookstore, you see all those books and you say, wow, there are a lot of writers out there. That is a true thought that you do not want to be thinking. Because if you countenance that thought, 3 days later, you're going to stop writing and you won't even know why. And it was because you got discouraged by all the competition, by all the writers out there. So you want to be monitoring even your true thoughts to see if they are thoughts that serve you. And the fourth, boy, this would be lovely to spend a lot of time on. All of you are a little aware or a lot aware of cognitive behavioral therapy and the idea of cognitions being important. What's much less understood is the idea of us having a certain kind of indwelling style. That is that there is a room that is our mind. There's a place we go where it's not just we're thinking thoughts. We're thinking thoughts in a place. We go somewhere when we think. And very often that room is claustrophobic or pressure-filled or just not congenial. It's not a place we really want to be. Our own mind can well be not a place we really want to be. The answer, it's on the next slide, but let me say it here since we're moving quickly, is to redesign your mind. This isn't about thoughts. This is about the room itself. What do I mean? Feel claustrophobic in there? Install windows. Throw them open. Let a breeze in. These are metaphors, visualizations, but I think you get what I'm saying. Install some windows. Maybe there's a bed of nails in there that you lay on all the time. Get rid of it and install an easy chair. Get rid of that bed of nails. Maybe you have to wear multiple hats in life, and we do, and you don't find that easy. Well, install a chest of drawers, and in one of the drawers have lots of different hats. And actually pull out a drawer and pick a hat for the task in front of you. You can really run with this metaphor of visualizing your room as a mind and redesigning your mind in ways that you like. The book on this Comes out next year, and it's called Redesign Your Mind. I'm not sure if I have any sooner than that writings on this, but I think it's easy enough to run with this idea. Forget for a little bit about cognitions and think more about indwelling style. We grow this style from birth. Typically, if we are creative people, it becomes rather more and more claustrophobic. We stay inside more and more. We have more and more trouble getting out of that room, etc. So we may have to do the work now of, just to play with this metaphor for a second. What if the walls have gotten really dingy over all these years? Maybe it's just time to repaper the walls with some new wallpaper or repaint the walls white. You get the idea. Play with this metaphor dash visualization and see if you can redesign your mind. Okay. Let me see what I want to talk about from this. I think we've talked about these things already. I'm just looking at the list. Yeah, I think we're safe to go to questions, and if I've missed anything, we'll see about coming back to them. But I do want to give folks a chance to provide your questions, and hopefully I have some answers for you all. So, Dawn, let me turn it over to you for a bit.
Okay, thank you. So the first question we had was, which book, if any, do you recommend for somebody falsely accused of plagiarism?
What issues of plagiarism? Say that again.
Falsely accused. Is there a book that you can recommend for dealing with? And we think we were talking about anxiety at the time.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a book, but let me give a kind of headline here. Of course, it depends. What I'm about to say is it depends. If somebody's coming at you with legal action, then my answer is not the right answer. But I want to give a general answer about the world coming at you with stuff. Don't respond. And I want to pause there. I write in controversial areas. I've been writing for 50 years. I have never responded to a piece of criticism in my life. That's a rabbit hole. The other person always has more time to continue the conversation than I do. In fact, that's their life.
Great answer.
So this isn't a real answer to your question, because plagiarism could be involving more serious things than what I'm talking about. But I just wanted to give the whole group that headline. Don't waste your time responding. Sometimes we waste our time responding because it's actually easier to write something and hit reply than to work on our novel. Sometimes it's just easier to get embroiled in the drama, maybe because we like drama. And that's why I was saying before, stop liking drama. Do your work rather than like dramas. It's just too easy to get embroiled in one drama after another, including, of course, the drama of the daily news or the drama of this or the drama of that. You really want to monitor how much drama you want in your life when you could be instead doing your real work. I apologize for that not being really an on-point answer, but I think I probably don't have an exactly on-point answer.
And of course, if you do respond, you then go down this ping-ponging type response, don't you? You do. End up with email ping-pong tennis.
And I think you end up getting defensive and also weaker. I think there's something about those interactions that weaken us. And I think there are so many ways we already weaken ourselves that we don't want to weaken ourselves with yet one other weakening tactic. So I just think it's good to avoid. It's sometimes just so infuriating that something is so infuriating that you say, that one I've got to respond to. but I always sit on my hands. I never hit reply. I'll sit on my hands overnight, which is a hard way to sleep, because I absolutely do not want to reply when I don't really want to reply.
Yeah, that's a lesson I could learn from. Thank you. I'm going to write that down. So the next question is, well, several people said, can we have a third session, Eric, instead of rushing, so that we can go over the bits that we rushed? And I did send a message to say we already have a third session, but by then we've got a brand new topic. So we've got a third session on Thursday, the 27th of August at 4 p.m. UK time. And what's that one about, Eric?
It's called Curism for Coaches. I have not talked on this call or the previous call about the new book I have out called Lighting the Way, in which I introduce a philosophy of life called Curism, K-I-R-I-S-M. And in that webinar, it'll be about Curism for Coaches. That is how a philosophy of life can help coaches, how they can use it with clients. I think it's going to be really interesting. I don't think folks will have gotten this anywhere else. And of course, parenthetically, if you'd like to get your hands on Lighting the Way right now, go to your Amazon, whatever your Amazon is, and also just go look at it, because right at this moment, I don't want to jinx it, but right at this moment, it has nothing but 5-star reviews. So you get to read a lot of 5-star reviews if you rush over there before somebody nastily puts up a 1-star review.
Mm-hmm. And it would be
about which I won't respond, by the way.
And it will be useful to have at least done a little bit of research on that subject, which will help you when you come on that webinar.
It would be nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. More anxiety reducing techniques, please. That was another question.
Let me give a couple more. There are so many. Straightforward one that everybody knows: ceremonies and rituals, lighting a candle. But it's not so much the ceremony or ritual itself. It's that the act reminds us that we have to be dealing with anxiety, and this is our way of dealing with anxiety. It's really, even though it seems ceremonial, it's really a conversation that we're having with ourselves about, let me relax, please. So all kinds of ceremonies and rituals, but a big one are the somatic ones. They're called technically discharge techniques. It's getting the anxiety out. And these are important ones. Why do we fear flying? Well, partially it's, how does that thing get up there and stay up there? That seems crazy. And why does it stay up there? There's that. But the other part is what's called inhibited flight, the smallness of the seats. We get anxious when we feel trapped. And that's called inhibited flight. So how do you break out of that trapped feeling? Because we can feel exactly that same feeling sitting at the computer typing. We can feel trapped there. And our anxiety starts to mount because we've talked ourselves into the belief that we're trapped, but of course we aren't. The whole tactic there is to stand up and walk around your chair. It's that simple. But if you don't have a repertoire of these tactics, you don't know to stand up and walk around your chair. Or to be more complicated about it, go make some popcorn for 2 minutes. Go do something that breaks that feeling of feeling trapped there. That will reduce the experience of anxiety. Another discharge technique that performers learn is what's called silent screaming. That is, you can't, of course, really scream as the audience is arriving, but you make a big screamy face and you act as if you're screaming. These are all different somatic ways, body ways of getting rid of the anxiety. There are cognitive ways that are important, but there are also somatic ways that are important.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question is, how do you find, oops, sorry, the screen's just gone. How do you find the balance of encouraging clients to be brave and take the leap and reality checking?
Oh, excuse me, I got distracted because I didn't realize there were 2 more challenges. Let me just go to the very end. Let me just go to the very end so I don't feel like blah, 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 blah. Okay. 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 Ask the question again. I'm sorry. I confused myself.
How do you find the
Oh,
balance?
guys, apparently you have 12 challenges, not 10. I'm sorry.
Ah, okay.
Ask the question again. I'm sorry.
How do you find the balance of encouraging clients to be brave and take that leap and reality checking?
It's a great question. You announce, the coach, I, the coach, announce that we must be brave. It's a we. I'm not saying you. We have to take these risks because if we mean to create, we do mean to lead. And so I affirm the biggest thing that the client wants to do. Maybe she's mentioned 7 things and I kind of have an awareness that the biggest thing is X. I'm very straightforward about saying, I think the biggest, bravest thing that you've just mentioned is X. And she'll say, because I'm usually right, yeah, that's the biggest thing. That's the scariest thing. Then I will say, what's the smallest thing we can do with respect to this big thing? So we have to take it back away from the risk, take her back from the edge or ledge to something doable during the next week. So let's say the risk is doing her memoir because she doesn't really want family members to be insulted by it. On the one hand, she wants to write her memoir. On the other hand, it feels dangerous to her. So now we've got that on the table. We now understand, for the longest time as possible, she hasn't realized how dangerous that's felt. Now we've got that on the table. Okay, yes, you want to do it, but also it feels dangerous. We've got that on the table. Now the work for the week may be A, getting a little bit of the memoir now written, 20 minutes a day on the memoir, keeping the amount of time spent on the memoir a non-scary amount, but also thinking through and addressing, maybe person by person, the exact nature of the threat. We may co-create an exercise where she thinks through, where she makes a list of family members and identifies which ones are going to care and which ones aren't going to care. And then thinks through, does she care whether they care? In other words, we're going to keep the conversation about the riskiness going until either she feels safe enough to continue and then just continues, or continues without feeling safe, which is one outcome that I find perfectly acceptable. Sometimes we have to do things that feel scary, even though they remain scary. Or not write the memoir, which I am not attached to any one of those 3 outcomes. She may bravely write the memoir, she may write the memoir and be afraid, or she may stop writing the memoir. We're going to keep monitoring these 3 outcomes throughout our work together. But those are the 3 things on the table. Let me just give you a quick example. I was working with a world famous sculptor who wanted to do, and she lives in the south of the United States, and wanted to do a big anti-war installation. She was given the opportunity to do anything she wanted. She had a huge space available to her. She wanted to do this anti-war installation, and it scared her. Everything about it scared her, but most especially what her own husband was going to say, or how he was going to react. And she was a brave woman. She was an older woman, a brave woman. She'd done a million things in her life. She'd been an advocate for her own work. She'd been an activist. The outcome was this was too scary. And she did a completely different, safer, wonderful, but safer installation. Then, of course, you have to forgive yourself if there's anything to forgive yourself, therefore, about, quote, not being brave enough. There may still be some work afterwards, but it's completely appropriate to want to be safe in life. This is just, I'm using my hands here to show a kind of balancing act between we must lead and we must be safe. How does that work together? Not that easily. Let me put a period there.
Okay, thank you. We've got quite a few questions to get through. The next
Great.
one is, Can you please talk more about how we deal with fear of pushback and also some specifics about how authoritarian wounding manifests itself? Great question.
Whoa, phew, yeah, it's
Mhm.
an awful lot to say in a short bit. Well, let me start with the first part. Again, if you want to hear lots more, I have a book out called Toxic Criticism, which is about how to deal with pushback from the world, how creatives can deal with pushback from the world. Let me just give you one tip from that book, and that's writing a Dear Critic letter that you never mail, or a Dear Critic email that you never mail. Because A, when you get hurt by the world, first, you're going to have a physical, visceral, emotional reaction. You are. We are. Don't stuff that. Have your feelings. Have feelings. You don't want to instantly go, I don't care. That doesn't matter. No, you can be hurt because you got hurt. Then, after a while, what's after a while? Maybe overnight. Then you might want to write this thing I call a Dear Critic letter in which you vent. You expletive deleted, expletive deleted, expletive deleted. That was so expletive deleted of you when you, etc. But there's another point to this letter, and that is gradually you might get to the place of agreeing with some of the criticism. And that might sound like, yeah, the middle of my novel is saggy, but I didn't like you mentioning that. Oh, wait, the middle of my novel is saggy. Oh, I guess I should do something about that. So not only is this a tool to deal with the critic or with your feelings about the critic, it's also a self-coaching tool that allows you to discriminate between the criticism that you can just ignore because it's just somebody else's opinion versus the criticism with some grains of truth in it where there might be some learning. Because I do want to make it clear, we can't just dispense with all criticism as if nobody has anything to say, because sometimes folks in the world have something useful to say. But it's sequential, and the sequence has to come in the right sequence. First, you stand behind you. Too often, first, we give ourselves away to the other person. Don't do that. Don't just agree. Some literary agent says X, and you instantly rewrite your novel. Don't do that. First, stand behind your own vision of your novel, because the next literary agent is going to say the opposite thing. I know we have a lot of questions, but I have to give this example super quickly. I did a book called Life Purpose Bootcamp, and I wanted it to be that title. I had lots of reasons for it to be exactly that title. So I submitted it to one of my literary agents, Janet's her name, and I said, I want to do this book called Life Purpose Bootcamp. Do you want to sell it? And she said, Eric, everything's a boot camp. This is the most boring title I've heard in the last 23 years. I can't believe that you came up with such a boring title. You guys are going to take that seriously, right? It goes in one ear and out the other. In one ear and out the other. So then I sent the book idea to my next literary agent, Jeff, and Jeff said, wonderful use of the current metaphor of boot camp. Can't wait to sell it, and he sold it in a day. Take this in deeply. Everybody has an opinion, including marketplace players, and they can be contradictory opinions. The Tchaikovsky violin concerto was booed off the stage. Now it's the warhorse of the repertoire. So this is all by way of saying, don't take criticism in. Put up that barrier while you give yourself a chance to get back behind your own belief system. Then, after you are standing on your own 2 feet, then you can see if there's any truth to the matter. Oh, and then there's the authoritarian wounding part of the question.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Let me just name 2 or 3 or 4 consequences, because we really can't do the whole thing here. Lifelong relational difficulties, picking bad partners. That's one lifelong one. Lifelong confusion and uncertainty, difficulty making choices, because that person didn't have the real freedom to make choices early on. Ongoing difficulties with the authoritarian. Almost the only thing that works to deal with a living parental authoritarian is to be about 5,000 miles away. Nothing else works. That's why Thanksgivings can be so terrible and Christmases can be so terrible, because the authoritarian parent is still there, being the authoritarian parent. Oh, I don't know, there are 30 consequences. Let me put a period there. And, oh, I know what to say. I invite folks who are interested in this to go to my blog, Rethinking Mental Health, and I have probably 20 or 30 blog posts on the authoritarian wounding on my blog there. So that's the place to go.
And I've downloaded it to my Kindle, The Authoritarian. I think it's going to be a great read. So next question. How do you feel about your advice to work every day and workaholism? And isn't it good to have time out for constant creating, working to refill the creative well?
Interesting. Lots of things to say there. If you are living your multiple life purposes and creating is only one of them, let's say you're getting to your writing first thing each day for 30 minutes. That's not workaholism. You can't find a way of translating that 30 minutes into workaholism. If you were like Picasso working on your painting 48 straight hours, we'd have a different conversation. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're just talking about a daily practice that is bound, that is sensible to you, that isn't too much, that has a ceremonial entrance so you go in there well, and a ceremonial exit so you return to the rest of the day with strength. We could say a lot about that, but daily practice does not lead to workaholism at all, because it's a bounded, more careful thing than that. Now to the second part. Absolutely, we need vacations from our work, but that's from a particular project, not from our work. My way of taking a break from project A is to do project B. Now, that may not work for everyone, but you have to be careful about taking a break from project A by, so to speak, doing nothing. So there are different senses or different ways to take breaks from project A. And another thing that I think is really valuable that has some of this relaxation energy or vacation energy is to take vacations with your work, because your novel gets as tired of your kitchen table as you do. So go for the weekend to the Bahamas, if anybody's allowed to travel ever again, or what have you. But go with your work. That will amount to a vacation, not from your work, but it will amount to a vacation. It'll be a, so to speak, working vacation. Don't make this sound like workaholism. If you take your work to the Bahamas, just work for the same 20 minutes and then go scuba diving and have a real vacation. But we don't have to leave our work behind in order to get relaxed. I have so much to say about this, but there's a way to negotiate your day with yourself. Build in what you need so that you can both get to your multiple life purposes and also get sufficient rest, relaxation, all the other things we need in life.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any thoughts about clients who are facilitators of creative practices who continually speak, write about their work in ways that are hard to understand? Part as a resistance of speaking in a way that is aware of the marketplace and the client, but part of it is that they think their work is complicated, so they need complicated ways to write or speak about it.
It's a big question.
It is.
First of all, it depends on the quality of the relationship you have with the client, and maybe also where you are in the coaching. If it's the first 3 minutes, I wouldn't do what I'm about to say. But if this were the 9th session and we were well joined and all of that, I might laugh. I might well laugh and say, you know, Chief Joseph said the truth only requires a few words. Or make some other kind of reference to simplicity being a virtue, or something along those lines. But you have to have a quality of a relationship going there, and you can't do this early, or the client will get defensive and will leave the coaching quickly. So I think that maybe I'll say this in sequence. In sequence, I think you have to tolerate this for a while. I think you have to just nod with this being the way that your client wants to describe X, wants to describe her painting style in 75 paragraphs, none of which you understand. Okay. I would probably say even right off the bat after getting those 75 paragraphs, do you have the shorter version for people like me? Do you have I would find some way of kind of immediately expressing that this isn't working, but I have to be very careful about how I say it. So I think I don't have a clear, simple answer here. We want to hold people accountable for their language. We want to help them do things that work better rather than worse in the marketplace. But we have to be very careful how we say these things. We have to be compassionate. And we have to understand that the person may be using all of these words because the thing itself isn't clear to him or her. She really doesn't know how to say it simply. And all of these words are masking the fact that she doesn't really know how to say it simply. I would probably, in thinking about this more, you can see I'm just thinking on my feet here. In thinking about this more, I would probably come up with an exercise or two that would help her move towards saying this thing in a more simple and comprehensible manner. I'd probably try to dream something up that would help her get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I think you're right, Eric. The first time they say it, we can, as coaches, we can allow the client that space and that time to articulate it out loud and get clear. But if they repeat it, then I think, and certainly when you're coaching somebody face to face or verbally at least, you can say, I'm very conscious of the time and helping you get the most out of this. So let's briefly recap or move on. So there's little ways that you can make them aware of the fact that they're using their own space and dedicated time. But with the written work, I mean, I think that's a good answer. If you've got a brief version.
Right, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. I expect my own accounting system. I suspect I give folks 2 chances. Mm-hmm. And I think by the 3rd chance, I would absolutely want to be helping them down the road to something new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. I think that's it. Lots of messages of thanks and love that. Very helpful. How long will the videos of Eric's 2 talks be available online for viewing? Stephen, they will be on the blog for ever and a day, so that's absolutely fine. They normally get uploaded a week after the call. And as I say, we've got the new call, the new subject, Thursday, the 27th of August at 4 p.m. UK time.
And Dawn, can I mention a few things before folks go? You all see up on the screen the creativity coaching training start in September. If that interests you, please come to my site and take a look around. The site is, well, the URL is there at the bottom. And also, if you are a coach who's looking to create courses or trainings or classes, I have a mastering course creation class starting August, which is soon. So come visit me at ericmaisel.com and look into that. Those are the things that may interest you, the creativity coaching trainings and the mastering course creation class.
Great. Just getting some thank yous for answering those questions very well and have you touch on so many of the phases of that experience. So thank you, fantastic, very valuable. As I said at the beginning, and certainly last time, I was blown away by the number of fans you've got and how popular you are, Eric. But you know, you've been doing this a long time and you've built up this good, loyal fan base, and I'm glad to be part of it now. So I think we've all learned a huge amount. Thank you for your spirit of generosity and sharing. Big round of applause. And for anybody who's still with us, just remember, very quickly in the chat box, we like to take 60 seconds to reflect on our CPD learning. You don't have to share with each other. but certainly share it with yourself, because 10 minutes from now, you're going to be dealing with children, work, coffee, walking the dog. And by Friday, when you come to write up your CPD notes, you'll have completely forgotten 90% of this. So just very quickly, in the next 60 seconds while we're quiet, just capture your key learning points that you've got out of today's session for yourself. Starting now. Okay. I will send you the chat box as before, Eric, because there are lots and lots of thank yous and little comments that I know that you'll enjoy reading. And just to confirm, yes, everybody in part 1 and part 2 will automatically receive an invite to Eric's 2-hour call on the 27th of August. Yeah. Everyone's saying it's amazing. Love learning from you. So much wisdom. Thanks for the reminders. Lots of CPD learning there. Fascinating stuff. So thank you, everybody, for participating with such an open mind and open heart. And thank you, Eric, as usual, for sharing so much wisdom with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun. Now I'm hungry.
Yeah. Well, you go and enjoy your day. And we'll hopefully see each other all again on the 27th. In the meantime, have safe fun in the sun and take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.